It's going to give me a microphone. Okay, we'll try that. Good evening. So, we may have a little bit of noise, maybe a little bit of, we've still got some people coming in, but we said we'd like to get started at 6 o'clock. It's a couple minutes after. So there may be a little noise of some chairs and stuff like that, but that should subside relatively quickly as we get into the program. For you that don't know, I'm Mayor Douglas Skindig. We've got some council members here this evening. If you want to raise your hand, that'd be great. I'm afraid I didn't see them all come in, but we've got pretty good representation. I've seen Deb Hall, Kelly Seller here tonight and stuff. And then we've got a number of staff members. I really want to thank all the citizens for coming out tonight. I had a prior engagement. I'm afraid I wasn't able to come to the first session. Can I just kind of have a show of hands, maybe who was here for the first public meeting that we had? A large number of you, so we really appreciate you coming back. I haven't seen it. I'm as excited as you are to see what came out of that first meeting. We had over 150 individuals here that evening. I'd like to say we were prepared for that many. We weren't. We've never had that great of a turnout before. I think we're a little better prepared tonight. We've got a big TV out in the lobby along with sound so that they can hear. I'm going to turn it over to the team here really quick. They've got a number of slides. Their presentation kind of show all the input that they've taken from a number of groups, not just the public meeting that many of you attended, but our youth council, who's going to give a part of a presentation. They went through an exercise that I was able to witness that, to be honest, it was a great exercise on prioritizing the project as we move forward. What amenities would we like to do first, those type of things. After the presentation, we'll take questions. Just to kind of keep things moving, even with the presenters, if you've got a question, hold on to it till the end, and we'll take all of those questions at the end and stuff. So we've got design workshop here tonight. They've got 3 individuals. Anna was out manning the table. We've got Rob and Micah that are going to be part of the presentation. Big reason we chose them was because of their expertise and experience in getting the public input. We think that is extremely important as we move this project forward. We did that for the 84th Street for the actual project, and this is just an extension. So I will go sit down and learn with you guys and turn it over to Rob and Micah.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Well, welcome. Thank you all for showing up. What a great turnout. Our first meeting, we were blown away. There were about 200 folks here, and so we have a great turnout here again tonight. This is our second public meeting, second of 3. Tonight specifically, I think each of you probably has a packet in front of you. You can follow along. I do have to warn you, we have reordered some of the slides, so I apologize for that in advance. Some of the things are going to be a little bit out of order, but you should be able to follow along. Tonight specifically, we want to talk about these items here. Corridor 84 will tell you a little bit more about our design schedule, where we're at. Mike is going to run through the engagement summary. We'll talk about how we ended up with a preferred alternative. And then I get to lead everyone through a preference survey at the end of the meeting. Mike and I and Anna are part of the design workshop. We're a landscape architecture and planning firm, but we're just one component of a much larger team. Some of those members are here tonight, and we couldn't do what we do without them, so thank you to all of those folks. In addition to that, we've actually had an opportunity over the last probably 6 or 8 months to interact with, I think, most, if not every, city employee here at the City of La Vista, but specifically, we have a project team led by Chris, Ann, and Rita that we check in with on almost a daily basis. So thank you to them, and we appreciate their guidance on that. With that, I'm going to hand this over to Rita a little bit to talk about all of the other exciting happenings along Corridor 84.
I had to have notes tonight. We've got so much stuff going on. Last time I just sort of ad-libbed this, but just to give you a sense of the things that are happening all along the corridor and up at the city center site, to keep you up to date. I'll start down at the south end. maybe you've noticed that they've been working on the car wash, and they hope to have that open within the next 30 days. So they're just about done with that. The McDonald's, the parking lot work has all been completed, and they're reopened. They closed for about 10 days, I think. And they have submitted plans to the city for the remodeling of that building. So that will be the next thing that you see happening with regard to the McDonald's. The majority of the street work in front of the car wash and McDonald's has been completed. They still have a little median work and some storm sewer stuff to do, but that concrete work is nearly complete. The building that you see just to the south of that that's going up is the First National Bank building. They've got steel up, they're starting to frame walls, and that building is actually scheduled for completion in April. So the bank should be open by April. Farther to the north, the first apartment building where you see the concrete poured walls going up, that is the developer's first apartment building. The first floor of that building will have retail on it, and then there'll be apartments above that. His second apartment building, which will sit just to the north of the one that you see right now, they're doing foundation and geopier work on that right now, so that's started as well. His first two-story building that is just office and retail, which will be directly across the street from those, is scheduled to start this spring. Our first parking garage, we've awarded a bid for that construction, and that work will begin next summer. Work and the sewer work, we've awarded a bid for that, and that work is starting now. Actually, we've been meeting with the contractor, so that work is getting underway as we speak. And then the golf course transformation. So you can probably tell the lake grading is nearly complete. Right now we're doing design work for the initial trails around the lake, irrigation, electrical infrastructure, lake water treatment, and potential lake recreation vendor stuff. So that's the piece that we're working on right now. And then work is continuing on the Streetscape project. So clearly we have a lot of things going on along that corridor. And so we just wanted to fill you in. We can answer any questions that you might have about any of those projects at the end of this as well.
Thanks, Rita. I would point out we do have some empty seats in the front here if people want to move in from the back. There's still some availability up front. So with every project, we want to make sure we come back to why are we doing this project. And a lot of it has to do with everything that Rita was just talking about. We're trying to set a framework that ties all of these fantastic development projects together in one sort of linear move. And so we come back to a project vision. You can read it in your pamphlet, so I won't read it to you, but it's really about creating this iconic and welcoming destination and corridor for the residents and visitors of La Vista. Next, I want to recognize, first off, the La Vista Mayor's Youth Council. If you're in the Youth Council, can you guys stand up, be recognized? Thank you. So this is a really great group. You guys can have a seat quick. Every place we do a project, we try to engage with local high schools, universities, and try to engage those folks in trying to help come up with the design strategies. And we were so lucky to already have a youth council established here in La Vista. So if you were part of the first public meeting, you saw them present on how we design the street and the different, how we come up with the different alternatives for designing the street. This time around, we walked them through a budgeting exercise that the mayor alluded to. So I'm going to invite two members of the Youth Council up here to talk a little bit about it.
Hello, my name is Billy Emig. I am the treasurer for the Mayor's Youth Leader Council, and this is my first year in the council.
Hello, my name is Alexis Delos Reyes, and I'm also presenting today on behalf of the Mayor's Youth Council. This is my second year in the council.
For anyone who does not know, the Mayor's Youth Leadership Council was created 3 years ago as a way for youth to engage in civic life through participation in local government and volunteerism.
So today we are going to discuss an activity we participated in as part of the stakeholder process for the Streetscape plan. But before we dive deeper, it is important to understand the foundation of a streetscape. So the goal of a streetscape is not only to introduce a gateway to the city of La Vista, but to introduce a heart to the city, something the city is currently lacking. A streetscape should be a place where the citizens can come and gather as a community in a safe environment. That is what we and the rest of the council have envisioned for this project.
When designing a streetscape, budget is an important factor that affects the outcome of the design. As part of our role in this process, we have participated in a budgeting activity with the design workshop in order to further our own understanding of how streetscapes are paid for, and offer feedback from the perspective of youth in the community. For the activity, each team was provided with a certain amount of money, and made a list of items to purchase for differing dollar amounts. And those dollar amounts differ depending on the quality: good, better, and best. The goal is to spend our funds strategically and create the best possible street with our limited resources. My group's vision was to make La Vista as visually appealing as possible. That meant investing in the best benches, the best concretes, and the best sidewalks. But that also meant we didn't have enough funds to do other things that we wanted to do as well. It was a great lesson in what do we really want to do and what can we do without. Because money was limited, some things had to be prioritized over others, and that decision can make or break a street, as we found out in this project.
So for my group's vision, we wanted all the nicest things. We wanted the nicest trees, sidewalks, benches, we even wanted the nicest trash cans. But we had exceeded our budget. So after months of compromise, we had to really consider what the citizens of La Vista would appreciate the most. So it took a lot of debating, but we decided that the streetscape should be a place that was very safe yet comfortable to the citizens. This meant getting the safest bridges, the best lighting to deter crime, and some nice benches to increase the comfortability. We also made sure to include greenery and a feature wall to increase the appeal to the area and encourage citizens to come visit.
Through this activity, we saw how plans such as the 84th Streetscape come together. Communities gather feedback, define their preferences, and prioritize their goals based on available resources. The result is a project that reflects the culture and tastes of the city and its citizens.
We wanted to thank the city and Design Workshop for continuing to allow us to be part of this stakeholder process. This is a very exciting change to our community, and we are very eager to see how the finished process will turn out. We hope that everyone in attendance will gain as much from this experience as we did. Thank you.
Thank you, Alexis and Billy. They represent a group of great youth council members here, a part of a much larger group here. So we really appreciated that opportunity to work with these guys here. So I'm going to talk a little bit about the specifics of this project. Right now we're still in the first phase, so we're in kind of the visioning, master planning phase of this project that has 3 public meetings. So we've already met with the public once, we're meeting with you again, and there will be one more opportunity for a public meeting. At this meeting, we're really looking to get some feedback on specifics, as Rob mentioned earlier, and really getting to look at, see what some of your preferences are on some of the streetscape elements. So we've done a fair amount of outreach. We've had our communications team here at La Vista has done a great job of getting the word out of the public meetings of the progress on this project, and here's some of the metrics behind that. We had a great turnout last time. It's actually looking like a pretty good turnout this time. I think some of you might recognize yourself or others in this last image here. Last time we had talked about the bar, and so from that we got feedback and sort of are able to take that feedback and develop a preferred alternative from these 2 options. So some of the community feedback that we got or that we received, and this is again a characterization of the feedback that we got. Connection was really important to the street. So the street as this conveyor and a connector to adjacent development, especially with all of the exciting projects that La Vista is currently undergoing right now, that places for people to occupy and places that are comfortable for people to occupy along the street was also very important. And the fact that it should be both a
a community space for pedestrians, and it should still serve that very important function to move people through in automobiles. So we're sort of understanding this as a balance between those two interests. And then another thing that we are characterized are to be very intentional, but not overly rigid. We heard from the community that it wasn't necessarily important that everything be exactly spaced at 30 feet on center, or that things be too rigid in that way, but have a little bit of flexibility in the plan. And then to emphasize all modes of travel that we anticipate on the street. And so, a very important component of this is to have a memorable identity, something that people understand that they're in La Vista, that they understand how special this place is. So that brought us to our preferred concept, which is the overall architectural and design concept behind this. What we've been developing is essentially this idea of a sculpted walk, and we can bring you through exactly what that means here in the next few slides here. So in our study, we looked at the adjacent land use. We looked at particularly the grading challenges and existing conditions, and started to develop these what we're calling character zones, which will suggest different treatments and suggest a different arrangement of street elements as we move through the street. So the largest character zone throughout the street is this commercial mixed use. So this definitely carries throughout most of the street. And as we move to our next character zone, there's also this residential character that carries throughout our project area that we want to acknowledge. A civic function as we're leading up to where we are right now, and those areas where we're engaging with the park. So this really sort of provides a framework for how we're going to make design decisions along this street. So again, people are such an important component of this new design. People are and pedestrians and how they move through the space is very important. So we're coming up, or we're suggesting, 3 essential typologies for how people, or how we see people moving through this space, defined as a congregation space, a circulate space, and a connect space. So those congregate spaces suggest places for people to gather, and they're at very active corners adjacent to development. They're the places where people will spill out from the adjacent development. The circulate plazas are much more for a momentary respite along your journey along the street. And then the connect plazas really suggest a little special moment where there are important connections to adjacent development. So here's the existing street allocation. We've got a very wide right-of-way. So a lot of area to deal with, or a lot of area where we can start thinking about designing here. So existing sidewalk condition is a very narrow, detached sidewalk, pretty close to the road. So it's about a 4-foot sidewalk, a pretty uncomfortable place for pedestrians. So the first move that we wanted to do was take that sidewalk away from the street, widen it so we can think about adding a bicycle mode of transport, but still allowing pedestrians along it for this idea of a mixed or shared use path, and then opening up those intersections where we can have a little bit more area for receiving a higher volume of people. Then we think about how this can meander, how this can react to the street conditions as we go on, but also thinking about the experience of the pedestrian and how it's much more it's much less boring when you have a little bit of a meander. And then we insert our architectural feature of the walls. With that, in concert, have these ideas of these berms that work with the walls to create this interesting kind of dialogue. And then we add our overhead plane or our overhead canopy to make a much more comfortable space for the pedestrian, but also to have that sense of enclosure overhead. And then meaningfully connect to adjacent development where that makes sense. And you'll notice here that we're suggesting earthen bridges or suspended bridges that are able to react to the tandem to create this sense from the roadway that of motion. So that datum of the wall stays static, and the landform moves such that you can sort of experience this sense of motion from the vehicle, from the eyes of the vehicle. So what are these walls doing? So these walls are helping to create space. They're taking this essentially linear park type concept and creating a sense of enclosure away from the roadway. We've got a couple different conditions that we're observing all the way down. Sometimes that wall is facing outward, sometimes the wall is facing inward, sometimes the wall is on the inside with a planting facing the sidewalk, and then sometimes when particularly there's big grade changes, the wall goes away altogether. So part of our concept is to really look at stormwater and how we can enhance the quality and quantity of stormwater capture. So in our longitudinal section, or that section that goes basically parallel to the street on the ditch side, so this idea of rain gardens where we can capture some of that water, allow it to infiltrate, and really provide an aesthetic feature where there exists none today. And here's some present examples of what that might look like. So from here, I am going to hand this to Rob, and we are going to get your feedback on a number of specific items that we're really excited to talk to you about.
Thanks, Micah. Okay, so I have the fun part now. Now is when we pull out those little keypads that you picked up at the front with Anna. If you were here for the first public meeting, you know how this works. We're going to ask a series of questions. We will open polling. That's when you can key in your response. We'll close polling, then we'll actually see in real time how everybody voted. So there's a red light, green light. There's a red light actually on your device right now. If you push one of the buttons, you'll see that red light shine, I believe. When we open polling, that light will turn green, and that's when you actually push the button. So let's give this a shot. The first question, what is your home zip code? So it looks like the responses are coming in. And if you screw up, just do it again, and it'll remember your latest punch. Okay, so we have 100 response. Oh, a couple more coming in. Okay, I'm going to close the polling. So we'll see how we did here. So we have a majority of locals, right? Okay, so another important question for us. How did you hear about the public meeting tonight? This benefits us so that we can make sure that we're communicating the best way. What tool did you use to actually find out about the public meeting today?
What was good primary?
Your primary tool. Okay, I'm gonna go ahead and close that. We'll see. Looks like the street banners were the big winner. So fantastic. So that's how we're going to do this. I'm going to ask you a bunch of questions in the next few minutes, and that's how we're going to go. The next topic I want to talk about is something that we with the city have been talking about for a little bit, probably the last few months. It's this idea of 84th Street right now, as you all know, is part of the state highway system. When it's part of the state highway system, that comes with a whole series of regulations and guidelines that we have to follow. Part of some of the discussions we've been having in these design meetings is, what if it was no longer part of the state highway system? We know that that would open us up to a lot of freedom in terms of design. We could plant trees in the median. We could change the speed limit if we wanted to. We could add additional access points along there. We could create mid-block crossings for the school children to cross. There's a lot of things we could do if it's no longer part of the state highway. There's also things that, there's pros and cons to both sides of that argument. I'm not going to read all of these. They're in your packet, so I encourage you to read those. We can talk a little bit more. We have folks from Public Works here that can talk about the potential maintenance impacts and some of the funding impacts. That might come up in some of the questions. But from a design perspective, one of the examples is what you see on the screen here. This would be an NDOT compliant design as it relates to the median. So what you're seeing is low planting, no walls, no trees, no obstructions, any of those sorts of things. And if this is no longer part of the Nebraska highway system, we have freedoms to do things. We can slow traffic. We can reduce the speed limit. We can add trees. We can add feature walls. We can add all sorts of great things to 84th Street. So just one of these first survey questions. Key in: would you prefer to see trees in the medians or no trees in the medians? Or if you need more information, that's fine too. Okay, I'm going to go ahead and close that. No is about 50%, and yes is about 39%. Okay, so the next piece I want to talk about is one of the major goals of the projects is to create an iconic, memorable experience when you come to La Vista. And to us, it's always been more than just a welcome to La Vista sign at the borders of either Giles or Harrison. I'm going to walk through two alternatives. One is a little bit more vertical in nature, and one is a little more subtle and horizontal in nature. But the idea is that this gateway feature occurs at the major intersections, specifically Giles and Harrison. So the first one we're calling La Vista Icon, and it gives drawings and sketches. But the idea with this is you come up with some sort of mark that's a little bit more sculptural, and that style then translates into all of the features, all of the signage and wayfinding and potentially site furnishings throughout the entire district. This is how that might look on a large sign, pedestrian sign, some wayfinding signage, things like that. And here are some representative imagery, definitely more sculptural. And it's a little more iconic, and the idea here is that it's not a welcome to La Vista sign, but it's a mark that's placed at both Harrison and Giles, and when you're there, you understand that you've arrived in La Vista. So that's one alternative. The next alternative is, again, the more horizontal expression of that, and so we're calling those gateway walls. You've heard about the wall concept throughout the entire project, and so the idea with this is punctuating those walls at Harrison and Giles. Here's an artist rendering or just a conceptual idea of how those might look. We would keep that same height of the walls, but we change the materiality at the intersections and just some representative imagery of what that might look like. A lot of texture, a lot of movement, a lot of patterning, those sorts of things. And so we're asking, which gateway option do you prefer? And understand that neither of these are an actual design. What we're actually asking for is, do you like something vertical or do you like something horizontal at those gateway points? This will obviously need much further refinement as we move forward in the design process, but this helps us understand where the community's at in terms of what they're thinking. So I'm going to close that. Looks like it's kind of 50-50 with maybe a little more preference towards the gateway walls. Micah described why we're using internal walls throughout the entire project. You can see in yellow here, we've sort of highlighted. Hopefully it shows up a little better on your printouts. But these walls really sort of trace the entire mile corridor here. This question is more about the materiality of those walls. What's the character and the materials of those walls? So one option is a more natural finish to those walls. Do we want those to have a stone veneer potentially, or look a little bit more natural? Or the alternative might be a little more architectural and patterned. We can do these with form liners and with concrete. And so the question here is, which interior wall option would you prefer? A natural one, or maybe a little more urban in character? Okay, looks like most votes are in. Looks like the natural one is the preference today. Now when we talk about planting, it's a mile-long corridor. I think if you were here for the first meeting, we identified there's about 16 acres of public space within this entire corridor that needs to have some sort of surface treatment. So some of that's going to be in stormwater treatment areas. Some of it is going to be just lawn space that we will mow. But in certain areas, we're going to do some plantings, and these plantings would be shrubs and perennials. The question we're trying to ask tonight is, do you have a preference in how those planting areas look? So one strategy is to plant plants in masses. So this is a little bit more of an architectural response. You group them for kind of a larger sort of dramatic story. The alternative would be a little bit more of a very drift scenario. So this would provide a different seasonal interest throughout the year. It might have a little bit more of an appearance of a meadow. And we're asking, which planting option do you prefer? Okay, I think that's about everybody. Oh, did that go? Yeah, okay, so mass blocks. Excellent. Okay, so Micah talked about these three spaces that pedestrians will encounter as they move throughout the corridor. So they're going to either congregate, they're going to connect, or they're going to circulate through these areas. Each one of those areas we would like to treat a little bit differently. Most of the sidewalks are going to just be concrete. It's the most efficient way to do that. But in certain areas, in the red areas on your plans, you'll see we'd like to use maybe a little different surface material. And so we have two options and two alternatives here. We have sort of a special paving that is maybe a little more bold. It's unit pavers, potentially in different patterns. Could reinforce some local branding or those sorts of things, graphic design. The alternative would be a little bit more of a traditional response, so maybe brick paving, some scored and colored concrete. So we're going to ask tonight, which special paving option do you prefer? Okay, I think those are all in. Looks pretty close, but I think a more subtle paving is probably preferred here. The next set of images are going to be focused on lighting. Now, we're going to primarily talk about the pedestrian level lighting. We'll have street lighting, obviously, there's street lighting in there today. The goal is actually to upgrade the luminaire from what it is today to a LED as part of this project. But really what we want to focus on is the lighting that the pedestrian is coming in contact with. And so we have two different styles and two different groupings of lighting. This first style appears to be a little bit more traditional and I would say maybe park-like, if you will. The second is a little bit more of a modern take, a little more contemporary. So the question is, which lighting option do you prefer? Okay, that's about it. Great, okay, so traditional I think is a little bit more furnishings, and these are gonna be in similar groups. They're gonna be in a little bit more traditional versus a modern group here. This is all the stuff that people come in contact with. So these are the benches and trash cans and those sorts of things. So here we see Micah waiting for his wife with all the packages there, looking very pleased. This is maybe a little more traditional grouping here versus something a little more sculptural, a little bit more modern. And the question here is, which furniture option do you prefer? Okay, so the results on that, a little bit more in favor of the sculptural, but it's pretty close. Okay, so finally tonight, for the first time, we're going to talk about this idea of a bridge. Part of the Vision 84 document that preceded our work called for an iconic bridge-like, in quotes, structure for people to be able to pass from the new park to the north there. And so that's the idea, that's where it's to be located there. I'm going to show 4 options, and it's kind of cheating because you already have those in front of you, but 4 distinctively different options, and at the end we're going to rank those in preference. The first option we're calling parallel arches because they are parallel arches to the roadway. The idea with this is that it has some reference to an idea of a bridge without all of the stays and all of the structural components. It's not needed. These arches are not needed for structural components, but it's something that's iconic. It's something that we could light up at night. This is a view from in the park, potentially walking north. You see these elements. These are some real-world examples of kind of what we're suggesting. The next option are what we're referring to are perpendicular arches. So we basically took the arches and we turned them perpendicular to the road. We also had a little bit of fun with the scale and the proportion of all of these things, and so that they're not perfectly lined up into a tunnel, but they have a little bit more movement and are a little more dynamic. You can see how they interact with folks down in the park level, and so they can actually stretch down and reach down and interact with folks at the park level as well. And here you can see in the distance how they interact from a scale standpoint with the planned future development at City Center as well. So a couple of real-world examples of how that might look. Again, these are just conceptual ideas at this time. The third concept is what we're referring to as the spire. This would be a tall central support that actually has a functional purpose, and it actually provides support for a cantilevered pedestrian walk from the bridge. This would give a pedestrian an opportunity to actually have a bird's eye view out and over into the park, while also providing a very iconic element as you're coming south down 84th Street or cresting the hill north as well. You can see how it also relates in proportion to the development to the south. And a couple of real-world examples of these. The final concept is something a little more traditional. It's something that we find a lot in this area in the Midwest, traditional columns. And it's an architectural response at the structure there on either sides. And again, we can dress this up or dress it down in 10 different ways, but it's much more of a sort of a subdued approach. And you can see that here in relationship to the future development as well. You've all seen bridges like this. This is just a couple of examples of those. So the final question of the night, please rank these from most preferred to least preferred. So your favorite to your least favorite. Okay, I think that's everybody. A few more trickling in. Let's see how we did. Wow. So that provides absolutely no direction. Yeah.
Well, I like the idea of C, but that
Okay.
leaves the other side of the road completely blank.
Sure.
Why can't you combine C and A or C and B? One of the, combine C and A or C and B to make
Sure.
it a complete on both sides.
Yeah, great question. I think there's a lot more work here to be done. We'll figure out what that means in terms of the feedback. But it's good. I mean, the idea here is that we leave with, at least at the next public meeting, have another iteration of what these bridge concepts could be. Part of this phase of the work is really to come up with just sort of a conceptual direction of what that is. So we will refine these even further. But it'd be great to get those one-on-one comments as we move forward so that we can try some new things. Okay, so that's it for tonight. We have a couple of other things to cover. Again, Micah talked about where we are in the process. This is the second public meeting of 3. We will take all the comments we've heard tonight. We will have the survey up on the website. We also have an exercise before you leave. I don't know, I think Anna has the dots. We have red dots and we have green dots, which I think the red are actually orange, but we're going to say orange is red tonight. Please pick up some dots there and put them on the boards in the lobby space so that we can see what you actually prefer versus what you don't necessarily like, specifically on those boards. That'll give us additional feedback, and also Micah, Anna, and myself and others will be in the lobby to field any additional one-on-one questions, specifically about the bridge maybe. But right now, why don't we go ahead and open it up to questions with the group and
All the cities.
yeah, I think that's a great question. I'm going to hand it off to Rita or
I'll go and I'll let the mayor go. I guess the first thing I would say is that the city is not building the buildings.
Okay.
That's a private developer.
Right.
So, first of all, but I think his intent really is to capture the view. That's part of why he chose that site to begin with, because it looks down on the park and it's going to be a gorgeous view. The buildings there are 6 stories. That apartment building that you see on the end is 6 stories, and you get up there and look down into that park. It's going to be a really gorgeous view. Now, would it be better if it was, a lot taller? Maybe so, but that building there is 6 stories high, and there will be a great view there. But again, the city is not building the buildings. The other thing I would say is that we've gotten the plans in for that building number 10, which I don't know if the mayor knows which one that is. Keep pointing. Yeah, right there. And the design that we have right now that the developer is proposing has a really cool, wider arched open structure thing on the top. I don't really know how to describe it, but it's got lettering around it that says City Center. But it's a really cool feature on the top of that building as well. So I think he's trying to do some things that are that are different and more iconic looking, but he's really in control of the building. He owns all of that ground up there, and he's building the building, so. Did you have anything you wanted to add, Mayor?
No, I'd lose half the audience if I said we were going to do a Trump Tower, so I won't. Well, what Rita said, the developer is in charge of that, but when you think about it, this other building here is a proposed corporate office at this time. He doesn't have that tenant. We'd love to be able to have that 350 to 1,000 employee business come out here, and we think we've got a shot at that. He's working hard at it. This could be a 6 to 7 story building. So if you think about all the 1-story buildings, as you're coming into La Vista, these buildings will be iconic themselves. We're hoping that the streetscape just kind of enhances that look and stuff, and that's kind of where we're at with that.
Another question? Yes.
I'm curious.
Let me give you the mic because I don't think they can hear you in the back.
Yeah, I was just curious, we talked tonight all about the streetscape, and when is that proposed to go to begin?
Well, I can talk about the design schedule at least. So we're wrapping up our design in March, and that's part of the first phase of this project. The next phase will be the actual design drawings, which are the construction documents to get it built. That'll be a number of months. But Rita, do you want to talk about the implementation?
Well, and then following that, once the construction documents are done and we've decided what the design is and we know what it's going to look like, then I think the city has some decisions to make about what can you afford and when can you afford it and how do you phase it in. And so that'll be part of the process that we go through as we go through this construction phase, is to say, are we going to build it in 4 phases? Are we going to do walls first, plantings first? I mean, I think that's still to be decided. Certainly, I don't see it starting at one end and building it all the way down in a matter of months. It's going to be a process, and we're going to have to work through that. But we intend to keep it going. Our intent is not to stop it here at the design phase and not move forward. It's just at what pace will we move forward, so.
I think to add to that, and I'll just go ahead and throw some of this out there. We went to a 2-year budget. We're just completing our 2nd year. Really one of the first cities in the state to go to a 2-year budget. That gives us a chance to do our long-term planning much better. We only vote and adopt that budget on a 2-year basis. But we do our financial planning 5, 10, 15, 20 years out. We have that. So all these projects that are in La Vista, the streetscape and everything else that we're making investments in, and then just the general maintenance of the city and our regular bills. Staff right now is putting that next 2-year budget together. Just like the project, it's not going to be all built in a 1, 2, probably even a 3-year period. We don't expect the streetscape, the improvements to the park, to be done in a 1, 2, 3-year period. It really could be almost a generational. We'll pay for it when we can afford it. Other questions?
When are they going to vote on the highway, whether it's going to be a highway or
So she asked about obtaining 84th Street from the state. I think where it's at right now, and John Kaufman, our city engineer, sir, he can jump in if he wants, but we've had discussion with the state. There's always been some desire for us to control it. And can I ask the audience a question? Because I had it on, I noticed that you said with trees or without trees, and the without trees had the higher percentage. Was that vote because of the look of the trees to bushes, or was that more of a, because we're going to have to take on some extra cost if we put trees in because it's a state highway? Was that more of your guys' decision, or was it more of the tree against the bush? Just, if you voted for the bushes, just kind of speak up. I was curious about that.
The look. I'm going to say the look, because if you're seeing the small as opposed to the tall, if we're supposed to be having this beautiful thing off to our east, we have tall trees, you're not going to see the beautiful thing off to the east.
Okay.
For me, it was both. It's, the trees is, again, while it's nice, it also obstructs views and safety in my book. Especially in the winter, if the roads get slick or something, it's one more thing that you can run into. You can have
Okay.
a interior view.
So I appreciate that. Go ahead, sir.
It was kind of a big question. We got
Yeah.
a slide of like 80 facts on it, and then it was like, do you want trees or no trees?
Right.
I mean,
So the cost on that is we get about $8,000 a year approximately from the state to maintain 84th Street. Believe me, that is an extremely small percentage of what it cost us. Maybe our new senator, maybe from District 2, John Arch, is here this evening. Maybe I can work him a little bit if he gets elected in November. So sorry to put you on the spot. But we only get about $8,000, and I say only $8,000. I realize that's a sum of money, but it's small in comparison to what it really costs us to maintain it. They do help and pay the majority of the costs in resurfacing. And that is probably a pretty large figure, and for us to get control of it from the state though, Papillion would also have to agree. And there is some bridge. So part of the deal that we're trying to work with the state now is if we did take control of it, they would pay for at least one more resurfacing in Papillion and La Vista, but they would also do the bridge repair work in Papillion before. They would give it to us, but they would agree to take care of it. So kind of a big decision on our part. It's a little bit of a budget decision, but it would be nice to be able to control it, that we could do things there that we're just not able to now.
Is this something we'd have to vote on?
Ralston is still, and it used to be that they wanted they wanted everybody to agree. They kind of came back to us and said, if Papillion and La Vista want a piece of it, we'll give it to them. Papillion's got some ideas. I just talked to Mayor Black. They've already done some landscaping or streetscaping in their downtown area. Really from St. Columba Hill though to Giles is pretty barren. And he said that as we move forward with this project, they would like to kind of tie into it. Maybe not the exact same design, but they would like to do theirs too. And it's just easier if we don't have the state. It's kind of where it's at. But thanks for asking that question and giving me the answers. Yes, sir.
As far as taking control of 84th Street, would that have any issues with the rest of the city as far as traffic flow overall for the metro area?
Not taking control. Hopefully this development brings more and more traffic into our city and creates somewhat of a traffic issue. That'd be a good problem to have. But I do think that the system in this area is set up quite well with 4 through lanes and then your turn lanes and your stacking lanes at intersections and those type of things. So taking it from the state I don't think would increase the traffic, but hopefully the amount of people coming from outside our city to help spend dollars in La Vista will.
Are there going to be condominiums in here too? I know that there's apartments, but are there going to be condominiums?
She asked if there'd be condominiums. That's kind of a city ventures question. They are in control of what they build up there and what they sell. I don't think at this time he was looking to sell the apartments, which basically makes it a condominium. But I don't think that's completely off the table, but that would be a question that we could probably share at a later date when Chris and City Ventures makes that decision.
Would it be possible for the bridge to have a double spire and then a bridge piece on both sides?
Absolutely, that's a great suggestion. You know, that was just one concept. The thought behind that was actually to give the view, right, to the park side. But there's also a lot of ideas about what's going to happen on the other side, at the pool, and what could be the future of that area. And so there might be a lot of reasons to do it on both sides. So great suggestion, yeah.
Let me just add something to that. So that's a great question, and that actually plays into the larger DOT relinquishment discussion. because it's not just trees, it's not just a discussion of just trees or shrubs, it's not just a discussion of speed limit, but also anything iconic like that would be, it would be cumbersome to say the least to get that approved. Anything that spans the roadway, so either that perpendicular arch option may pose some difficulty to actually get that approved. The spire concept obviously has to go through a whole set of approvals to do something like that. So that's also a very sort of tangible aspect to the NDOT relinquishment discussion. So whether or not 84th Street stays a part of the highway system, that's one of the aspects of flexibility that will be in question.
I just wanted to tag on to that when the mayor was talking to you about this whole relinquishment issue, and Mike has just struck on that. It's not just about whether you can put trees in the median or not put trees in the median. NDOT has a lot of other stuff. You know, we've talked about mid-block crossings, so there's some pedestrian crossings, not just at the intersections that you see now, but halfway between those blocks. So, for instance, if something would develop in the area where the old Baker's is there a way mid-block to cross between those two developments? You can't do that now under NDOT rules. You know, you can't do the spires like Micah was talking about. We can't change the speed limit. We don't have any control over that. So if you want to reduce the speed limit, you can't do that. So while we ask the question about, do you like trees or do you not like trees in the median, right after the relinquishment, decision, there's a lot more to it than that. So there's a lot more things to consider. If you, I guess in my mind, if you like all the really cool, kind of neat, out-of-the-box sort of stuff, it's probably a lot harder to do that if NDOT is in the picture than if they're not, so.
Question for the mayor, I believe. Can you tell me how much more, if we were to take over that road from the state, how much more liability would the city assume on that?
John. You know what makes a great elected official? Great staff, and believe me, I've got a good staff. So, John, she asked the question on if we take it over from the state, how much more liability do we assume? Would it be any different than we already have on 96th Street and the rest of our city streets? Or
Thank you, Mayor. 84th Street is a state highway. If there's an accident out there, the state has the primary responsibility for lawsuits. We are involved to the extent that we provide some maintenance, so we have some involvement in litigation if there's an accident. But the primary person would be the state of Nebraska. Now, if the state of Nebraska is out of the picture, then yes, we have an increased liability because there's one less person that people can go after a deep pocket. But that's, as the mayor said, we have many arterial streets in similar situations, so I wouldn't consider it a great change in liability.
When you spoke about the walls and the motion concept along the sidewalks and so forth, are you